Hello everybody. As you can tell, it's summer and I kind of miss teaching, so I'm going to just do a little lesson for anybody who's fiending for some clay and the whole idea of throwing a pot. If you've ever wondered how to do it or if you already do it and you just want to watch somebody else do it, I found that with pottery, when I look at other potters, even though they are doing similar things or this techniques and basics are the same, there's always little nuances in how they do something that I think, oh wow, that's kind of cool, I'm gonna apply that to my work. And then occasionally like you look at them and you're like, I'd never do that, that sounds dangerous, or whatever. But anyway, I want to share this with you. Here is a piece that I made just before I started videotaping, and then what I've got here is called a Versabat, made by a company called Great Lakes Clay. I don't know if they sold the property rights to it to someone else and if you could still get it or not, but they've done their cycle of productivity and now moved on to other things. But you can find clay anywhere. You can dig it in the ground if you want. I love that. I love going by a construction site and seeing earth uprooted and then seeing veins of clay running over there and put it in a bucket and then making it so that you can use it. Sometimes you have to put it through a screen, get all the rocks out, but clay's different everywhere you go. So you dig some here, dig some there. It's all gonna have little nuances that are different. So I got this from a friend, and then this bat is really cool because now that I've thrown it, I can take it off, okay, and then put another one on and throw again. But before that, I want to show you this tool here. This is the wire tool, and this is going to help this piece come off later. Basically, I just slice through the bottom, and then that separates it from the board. I'm just going to leave it there because I can remove the board. Had I not had this Versabat, and if I was just throwing on metal, the next point I would do this. I would get underneath it and I would kind of lift it and then go put it onto a board where I have my other pieces set up. But for right now, I'm just going to keep it on here. Put it off to the side, and then put another board on. So let me grab one. Hopefully you're having a beautiful day. It is a beautiful day here. Versabat. Fits right in there, right? And this one had a little bit of white clay on it beforehand, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a little bit of water and clean that off, because believe it or not, just that little bit of white clay, since I'm working with a red clay, will mark the red clay. And if you don't mind, that's fine, but I'm trying to stay pure with the clay body here. So, ball of clay is what you need. Wherever you get it, it's important to wedge it before you start. Some of them you can buy pre-wedged and ready to go. But the simple technique is called the chrysanthemum method, or spiraling. And then basically what you're doing is you're pushing down and turning a little bit. Pushing down, turning a little bit. And you just keep doing that repetitively, 20 or 30 times. And when that didn't work. There you go, you guys back. Alrighty, nice. So basically what you're doing is you're just repetitively turning and pressing, and it compresses all the air bubbles out. And the reason why they say chrysanthemum is because it starts to spiral like the flower. And then you start with a ball. Some people will measure it out, half pound, pound, 3 pounds, depending on what they're making. If they want to make consistent mugs, maybe they'll just go 10 1-pound balls of clay and then 10 mugs that'll be pretty much the same size. Boom, down. And then that's called throwing down. And they think that's because it's called throwing, is that the initial throwing down to get it stuck. So I stick it, but it's still not perfectly centered. And that's the next thing you need to think about, is centering a piece. Just like in life, if you're centered, everything goes better. If you're not centered, even the simplest problems can seem monumental. So just like in clay, you want to center that clay so it responds more efficiently to what you want to do with it. Okay, so we got centered now. It should go easier. Notice I'm not using a whole lot of water. A couple things, less mess. But then also, if you use less water, it keeps the integrity of the clay so that it can hold up to dynamic forms later. If you get it too wet, those forms will collapse as the water seeps in. But also, if you're using a fine clay body, or even if you're not, if you're using one that has many parts, the water will seep a lot of those fine clay particles out of the clay, which also reduces the strength of the clay. So now I have it centered. Everything, I stay the same, and I let the wheel and the clay come to me. So it's spinning, it's doing the work. I'm just pressing down about a half an inch. Some people go 3/4, some people even more because they just like to trim it. They can't stand the idea of going all the way through the bottom and ruining it, which you can easily do. If you're worried about that and you really want to be precise, one technique you can do is you can use this needle tool. Okay, any type of needle, you can basically poke it to the bottom, and then I put my finger to where the metal ends and the clay begins and pull up. So that is just about perfect. I don't want to go any thinner than that. In fact, even when I trim it, I probably only want to trim just a little bit, lest I go through the bottom. And remember, trimming is basically where you're removing all the clay off the piece after it's stiffened a little bit, gotten leather hard, just to lighten it up and perfect some of the imperfections. So now that I got this open form, I'm going to squeeze a little bit on the outside and squeeze a little bit on the inside, and then as I do that, I add a little bit of water from the sponge just to give it a slide, and then I just squeeze and then slowly raise my hands up as one. And then you don't necessarily worry about the top of the clay. That's where a lot of beginners, they see this all wobbling up top and they freak out, and then they totally stress out and over adjust. It will come into line as long as you're working from the bottom up and staying centered. So the bottom is what you want to focus on. So right here, I'm squeezing to get that excess clay, and then I'm slowly just raising this up and up and up and up, compressing the clay from inside and out, and that causes the clay to rise. So now we got a nice little simple little, I don't know, cup form. Could be a tiny little bowl. And that's all I wanted to do, was keep it simple for you. Other than, I want to show you a cool little trick. So as you can see, I've got a homemade tool here that's got basically little metal 5-pointed stars that have a hole in them, and I found 4 of those. Put it onto a little bolt here, put a clamp so they all stay on, and then now I've got these spinning discs. Okay, so a roulette is basically anything that is round that you can roll into something or spin on something, and it creates patterns and textures. So you can buy those at stores, you can make your own, which is what I like to do. You can even do it out of clay if you want, make them and then fire them and then use them that way. But this one, holding up against the side, and then as I put pressure, it starts to catch. And then I let that catch, and then as it does catch, I speed up the wheel, and I get this baby rolling. And then I work from the bottom all the way up to the top, being very careful of how much pressure, lest you lose the whole piece. And I do like a little bit of like torture to the clay, I guess you'd say, because it adds a little bit more of an organic look to it. So that, as you can see, let me see if I can get this just for you so you can see the texture on there. I don't know if you can or not. Yeah, I'll show you a little bit more on the end here. On the end of it. That's what happens when you're going solo on photography. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this a little bit more body. So I'm going to start in the inside and the bottom, and I'm just going to push out gently as it spins, stretching that clay from the inside out. And I have to be mindful because that tool did dig in, and at some areas sometimes it digs in more than others, and you'll have a hole. So you got to feel it so that you don't press so much that you open up a hole in the clay. But what I want to do is I want to add a little bit of body, and I also want to open up all those little textures and crannies, nooks and crannies wider. Because ultimately what I'm going to do is after firing it, I'm going to put a sweet glaze in it. And a lot of times when you have textures to clay bodies, that changes the glaze as it goes in and out of grooves. They can get deeper and richer or more pale and subtle. So textured pieces can really show that off. Okay, now I'm going to stop the wheel, and as you can see, those textures opened up. This rough top isn't it's kind of like in the border. It's not perfectly smooth, but it's also not wavy enough for me that actually makes it interesting. So I am going to go back, and I'm going to try to kind of calm it down a little bit. So basically just a little bit of water in my hands, staying in one spot, just like we talked about. And then I'm kind of just channeling this clay through my fingers, applying a little bit of pressure, and being sensitive to how much this is going to take. And I'm going to go with the smooth top, which means I'm going to press it down until it's nice and consistently smooth. And that way it's got a nice ending to this rounded form. Okay, so now we're just going to finish it up. Sometimes what I like to do is on the inside leave a little design, especially on open forms. So I'm just going to use my finger, and I'm going to start on the outer edge, and I'm just going to put some pressure down, and this helps strengthen the bottom too. Pressure down and go to the middle, and then back. I'm just sliding my finger back and forth on the inside of the clay pot. And then once I get the clay consistent, what I like to do is I like to leave some kind of little decoration on the bottom, whether it be a spiral or a little flower form or star form, just by moving my hands. And let me show you what that would look like. I know you can't see it where you're at, or this angle, but if I can get the light just right. You're probably worried about this piece. You're like, oh my God, it's gonna fall off. That's all right. I think it'll be okay. I'm getting in the sunlight here a little bit better for you. Yeah, there we go. See that? That's what I'm talking about. All right, so let's get this back up. I'm gonna show you one more thing before we end this clip. And basically, you gotta think about the bottom of the piece. So it is a nice form, but I can make it even better by digging at this base and getting any excess clay, and I can even push in the base a little bit to get a little bit more of a sharp angle. And what that does is it gives the piece a little shadow when it sits on the tabletop and makes it seem like it's floating, or get a little bit of a hovering on the tabletop. So I'll show you what that looks like from the side now after I did that. As you can see, it's much more pleasing in terms of form coming back in. And I did the same thing with this one too. So once you get those forms, you can get a nice lift. And you have two similar forms, one a little bigger. This one's got a little bit more of a wavy top, smoother top. But these will be nice pieces in a set. Once I fire them, glazes, and then good to go. So hopefully you learned a few things. If not, maybe you just enjoy the process. It's very relaxing, calming. If there are any questions, just message me. I'll get right back to you. Take care, have a good day, and a great summer.